All right, we're back. Episode 35, officially back from the O Show. Pete Arneson, Jason Aarons, and we're going to talk about it now.
Yeah, big hiatus. It felt like we had nothing but stuff to talk about,
Yeah.
but sworn to secrecy during the time frame. So
Yeah, so
uh,
you were, I mean, for lack of a better term, contractually obligated to not talk about the Olympics while at the Olympics, being an official on the jury for multiple events.
exactly, yeah. In my
The
capacity
media.
as head judge
Yeah.
for all of the free ski disciplines, was not permitted to speak about it. To in any form of media,
Yeah.
as an official.
As minimal in the media forefront as we are, still didn't want to ruffle any feathers. So and that's why we didn't do an X Games breakdown, because we pretty much immediately went to the Olympics and we knew we'd start touching on Olympic things once we were there. So maybe we'll bounce back to X Games in another episode. Maybe we'll just let it be what it was.
Yeah,
Um,
X Games is all a blur
yeah,
now. Well, I mean,
yeah,
after getting through the last month, it really I forgot we had missed the X Games
yeah,
one. So I guess
yeah. It was
we'll see what the feedback is. People are desperate for the
X Games
burnout.
was a fair amount of beers at the touring bar in the past for us, but we did spend 3 weeks in Livigno. Uh, Jason staying right downtown near the venue. I was up a little higher in town at the near the Moguls venue, about a mile walk down to our part of the area.
You did
But
you did that walk multiple times a day,
I
I
did,
feel like.
I did.
And Toby and I did that walk twice and never stopped talking about how miserable it was. Like,
Well, I think that was it was hard to get you guys or anybody to come up in our neck of the woods, and it was
well,
more
that's
fun
because we had the
down
bar.
here.
We had the
Yeah,
touring bar.
touring
Uh,
bar with Italian Bad Bunny.
Italian Bad Bunny, the manager
Yeah,
of that place, that guy was the man. Had the massive pin collection on his suspenders and tie. That guy was a local legend. But we befriended. I mean, we were long term residents of this hotel. We were there for 3 full weeks, pretty much. So we got to know the staff, and those staff were on 100% of the time that we were on. I don't know how their work schedules work, but none of them had a day off the entire time. They were all apparently going to Mickey's
yep.
and just shutting it down every night as well. But yeah, it was hard to leave our safe space at the
Yeah,
touring.
yeah, fair. Yeah, I was thinking, I mean, the amount of every single day, it's like, all right, what do we do now? We meet at the tour, have a beer, some tapas, and we hang out and we discuss everything that happened that day. That's just was our daily thing we did every single day. But anyway, so Jason was over there over there as the head judge for all the ski events. I, thanks to you, got put into contact with Olympic Broadcast Services, and I went over as I had no idea. I didn't really know my role going in. My paperwork and everything said MCAM replay analyst. I had no idea what that was. Once I got into it, I found out that I was to help the Alibaba, so the Chinese crew, do a special replay that was the one that did the rotate around, the matrix looking one, and help sell that into the show. So if it was good, we try to work it into a replay package, so on and so forth. My job progressed as I got there, knowing the sport, where I was able to help more in the truck as far as what they needed to see for replays, what camera angles just weren't working for the show, and trying to make the show better. To a certain extent. I mean, I was still new guy sitting in the back seat behind the director, but I was listened to quite a bit more than I expected, which was pretty cool. So it was a really cool opportunity for me to go over and be in a TV truck as opposed to being talent at a contest.
Yeah, getting the back end of it, the one
Mm-hmm.
in the ear of the talent throughout the
Yeah,
contest.
yeah, exactly. And so it's a lot more yelling, a lot more chatter in the headset than I was used to. But really cool to work with the replay people, to be in a truck with people doing robo cams and tape and audio and every single working part of the TV production being in that truck, and then our show goes out to every other entity across the world that they put their name on, NBC, whoever it may be from other countries, and they take our feed, and for better or for worse, that's what they have. So
Yeah, I mean that's kind of the crazy thing about the Olympics, I feel like, is the broadcasting
yeah,
situation, and that OBS just runs it. They provide the footage. They're the only ones that have access to it, which, I mean, it's cool because of the distribution of it is just unlike any other contest we have in skiing specifically, that just everyone seems to have open access to it on their local provider and getting to actually pay attention to it. But yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like on the judging side, obviously, I know that the snowboarders were alluding to it and spoken publicly about it since, but we had our own video feed throughout because in previous Olympics it had proven difficult to judge based on just the footage that OBS provides.
for
And I
sure.
think you guys did a good job this year, and I think having you in there helping with kind of framing the replays as to what they'd want to show to be able to break down an understanding of the competition, I think it did a lot better than in previous years. But still, for anyone that was just watching the OBS feed, I think if they were sitting in a position to critically evaluate everyone given a fair playing field, you'd be hard pressed with
For
the
sure.
stuff you get from there.
Yeah. Well, and to clarify, my venues for truck one were half pipe and slopestyle. Those were the two venues that we had. There was another TV truck that did big air and skier cross. So we had nothing to do with the cameras or anything for big air. It was a completely different crew. That being said, there were definitely things throughout slopestyle, our first qualies, that there were, I mean, cuts in midair, stuff like that. Things that we tried to fix as we went along. And I mean, a big shout out to my director, Nate Hill, who really took any bit of info, any bit of critique that I had from the sports side. He immediately changed things. So I thought that was pretty cool to work with a crew like that. And these are people who do all sorts of sports, NBA basketball, bull riding. I mean, this from you name it. They do all sorts of major sports. So it's
Just the
interesting.
just the fact that we're even receptive to change, you know, because
Yeah.
you hear so much the opposite with like production companies specifically. So I mean, I thought it was cool. Like, and realistically, the OBS replays were kind of phenomenal. And like, well, while I had the judges watching our own dedicated feed, I always had one broadcast setting essentially from OBS showing exactly what the world was seeing, because I feel like at the Olympics specifically, that's the one thing that you want to
Yeah.
make sure you can avoid, is that the one thing that the whole world sees via this OBS feed isn't some glaring issue affecting the contest,
Right.
such as happened to
Yeah.
snowboarding in
Yeah.
Beijing with the knee grab.
Well, and I think that was one thing that I appreciated with the crew I was working with, is they told me from day one, call out things that we need to focus on in replays. So if someone came off a rail 5 feet early, if we had a good shot of it, we put a Mega Mo shot on them coming off the rail 5 feet early. And the only example I can think of specifically would be Zoe Sadowski Sinnott in snowboard slopestyle on the final rail, second to last rail. She came off a good 5, 6 feet early, and you could see her whole body go behind the rail. And we had a shot of it, and that was important for the people to be watching at home if they're going to have some critiques, or even if that, because that replay goes to NBC. So if Todd Richards sees that and is like, oh, well, maybe I wasn't right on my first take of this, they just showed me 6 second long slow mo of her coming off the rail early. And if you have, I mean, a judgmental brain, or even some sort of brain that can recognize those kind of things, you can evaluate that and be like, well, that's a mistake. And we did that for jumps and grabs as much as we could as well. And then for slopestyle, we only had 2 cameras on takeoffs. So we were able to get takeoff on jump 2 and takeoff of jump 3. So if there are any sort of nose butters, anything like that, tail butters,
Which
we
there
were able
were.
to, right. We were able to get a good zoomed in shot of that. when those things happen. And my EVS producer, who does the replays, immediately would put those in every time. He would skip other things to show that if it was
Yeah.
important, which was
Yeah, I mean
cool.
it's interesting. It's
Yeah,
like a talking point that I feel like is a clear distinguishing thing, like trying to break down the importance of a grab or like the complexity of a certain specific body type in a grab is can be pretty difficult to convey in a short amount of time. But a butter is something that when done properly, the visual of it I feel like really plays well for the general public trying to understand what's going on.
right. And from a commentary perspective, that's something that's unique and different about a run. And you want to be able to talk about it. And if it doesn't come through in a replay package, you're hung out to dry almost, where you talk like you're going into it saying, well, that tail butter is really what set them apart. And if it doesn't come through in a package, a replay package, and you can't talk about it, it's like, well, trust me on it.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, I
it's
mean,
kind of
and
one of
like
those.
thankful for Tom with those things, like the way
Yeah,
Tom handles those things. I think free skiing really does benefit from having Tom's
100%.
voice being the one representing. Like again, to talk about the snowboarders and what you were saying with the replay was Zoe's like clear and obvious early exit of a rail. I mean that really has, but I mean I like ultimately I think the snowboarders are always up against it in the
Yeah,
Olympics
yeah,
because the sport is cool and gets eyes on it, and it's a lot easier to talk about having an issue with the judging than coming at it and saying, "Wow, they did perfect." I'm really glad how they did, and ultimately they were unscathed throughout the entire competition. Like big air, I expected to be contentious. It wasn't. It really. I mean,
true.
there was the hand drag, double hand touch situation that they dealt with, but ultimately, like I think based on the way that they've been judging all season, the trajectory tracks with the way that was rewarded, and thus everybody understood it. Women's big air was awesome. That one kind of just defined itself. They got. I mean, they got praise on that one in terms of
Hmm.
how that one went. Both the half pipe ones, I know the Chloe versus Guyon situation in
Yeah,
women's pipe was a bit controversial, but ultimately, again, seemed like the community for the most part completely backed it. Obviously,
right.
you have news entities coming and
Yeah,
saying
it was one of those controversial if you're not a ball knower. Like if you don't know
exactly.
ball,
You don't
like
know ball, you might have
yeah,
an issue with this result.
yeah.
You understand what actually happened. Chloe got beat, and
Hmm.
so people kind of dealt with that. Men's half pipe, I thought was going to be crazy contentious, highest level of riding I've ever seen. Pretty much, I mean, Scotty James didn't win, which I think everybody expected him to put down that last run and win, and still, like I mean, I think they got that result right. There wasn't really anyone questioning that Scotty should have won, or I mean, with them in that contest, you could have probably put third through sixth in any order, and it would have
Yeah,
made sense.
yeah.
Um, but I think everyone agreed with that, and then they go into slopestyle. Like everyone's been pretty on board with what they're doing, in my opinion. I mean, specifically with how careful they're trying to be coming in from the last Olympics, and then kind of weather is the thing that makes the contest the most difficult for them. And that course, again, like we didn't have a test event on that venue. It ended up being a course that really was hungry for speed, particularly through the jumps. The rails super quick up top, like you're through those, you're on your edges the whole time. Like in the ski side, we saw people doing some creative stuff to control speed because of how too much speed they had. But then going into the jumps, it was always pinning it. And when it was the snowboarders, and they dealt with some weather in that part of the week, just the sheer limited number of landed runs and people not riding to their absolute fullest potential, I think makes that scoring system variable. And
Yeah,
specifically with the women, where Zoe does the winning run, but has a clear and obvious mistake in the run,
yeah.
SBS is just supposed to account for that, And like, I think if there are any issues with the way SBS was applied to that, maybe sevens carry too much of a value on the lower jumps compared to some of the bigger tricks we saw. Maybe they adjusted because they thought the weather was going to inhibit anybody from doing something bigger than a seven on those jumps, so they wanted to max
Yeah.
out the reward. Uh,
You're being very political right now, which I appreciate. Uh, I have some beef. There were multiple tens given out, perfect scores on features given out with 5 riders still left to go on it in the SBS scoring. I mean, there were some mistakes being thrown in there as well. I'm not trying to like throw them completely under the bus. But at the same time, if you're doing the scoring system correctly, you can't give a perfect score with 5 riders left to go.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, in SPS, I guess philosophically, a 10 makes more sense than in another discipline, being 100. Because it's one element of the run.
Yeah,
you can max that out by doing something so incredible that they have to blow it and do 100 early in that section to give them 10 full points. Not recommended. Not something I'd say would ever happen more than once, and would only have to be like an insane situation. But that was something that I just, based on everything that we've practiced with that system, I'd never encountered that problem. Like we're always trying to be very meticulous about how heavily we reward something, but it ends up always being on the lower end of the scale, because so few things actually meet that bar of truly exceptional on any one particular feature, and only certain people are capable of doing that, specifically on the rails.
Well, I think it was, I might be speaking out of turn. I might be incorrect as well, but I think it was a switchback 9 and a front triple 12 that were scored both 10s. Yeah. But, I mean, to each his own on the scoring system on how you're going to do it.
But to that point, they did have a tough contest, and they have been roasted.
Yeah. I
thought they made it out unscathed, and on the final event, then Todd came for them. People really, I think it was like a overall dissatisfaction with just not seeing everyone be able to actually land runs and ride away from stuff consistently.
Yeah, you weren't getting the best riding out of that event, and I think that made it even more frustrating for sure.
Yeah, and I feel like we, on the free ski side, that we'll like dive into all this stuff, but I feel like we ended up having contests that were fairly climactic, minus men's slopestyle, which I think is the same situation that they dealt with here, where it just came down to the weather conditions on that day provided to make the course a little bit more challenging for people, and we didn't see the highest level of runs. There was overall frustration the entire time. The best runs were not landed late. They were landed in the beginning of the contest, and then nothing could seemingly overpass these runs or minuscule additions to the runs from that held for the entire contest. So again, appreciate Tom for not throwing us under the bus.
Well, and I think, we, in our world, we're very lucky to have Tom and what he does for the sport, being such a good representation of the sport in that high caliber commentary role, but also respecting the other people that are also doing jobs at the events, where he hopefully will never throw anyone under the bus. And if he does, I mean, he'll have a good reason for it.
Exactly. Once I stop being around so much.
There you go. So anyway, I guess we can kind of jump. There's a couple other random things, but we'll bounce into those maybe in between. With slopestyle, the course was interesting. By interesting, I mean it was very simple compared to most courses. It was a World Cup course at the Olympics. It was the 3 rail sections, one of which had 2 rails in the section with a pad real tight together. It was simple, like you said, because of no test event. So they weren't able to do a test event because they were still doing construction. And that construction they were doing was actually of that final jump, which a lot of people I've found out didn't know. That final jump was a parking garage.
And a full-on scaffolding.
Yeah, so they built a parking garage there, hoping that it could hold the weight of the snow and the snowcat and everything on top of it. It didn't. So then they had to build scaffolding around the parking garage to then hold. I have a picture of it. I'll put it in when we're doing this. But to hold the weight of the snow and the snowcat for that to be the final jump. The other thing, I
think in general, that's something that's like pretty worthy of speaking on. The level of infrastructure that goes into the Olympics compared to any other competition is really mind-boggling. Like always at every competition, you're dealing with. I mean, they're producing at a very high level, but there are limitations, And at the Olympics, granted, there's limitations. They just seem like, from a venue standpoint, they're just going nuts with it. They're just putting the most boxes on hill. I mean, it's just so much goes into it, and the build out for that slopestyle is insane. The fact that every rider from the exit of their slopestyle course had to go
Yeah.
walk and take a elevator up 2 stories to then get to the chairlift to then load up that park again. I mean,
Right.
just
Which was an issue. I mean, there was a
which
lot of
with them getting pushed by a snowmobile by the end of it because it was
yeah.
such an issue.
Yeah, it was an issue because of how much it was draining. They had to go in. So they finished the last jump. They skied out of the corral and they had to skate up a small hill and then down a small hill into a underground part of that parking garage, which then had an elevator. So then they had to take their skis off, get in the elevator, go up the elevator, come out, hike up another little hill, put their skis back on and get on the lift. And this, I mean, it happened because they needed the space to build the course and they wanted everything down below. But that was actually the bottom of the mountain. So that was where, if you came to ski there on a normal day, that's a parking lot. That whole area at the bottom jump is all parking lot. And that's your access to the mountain right there.
Wow.
Everything was brought down for more viewership and to be able to have a corral in a flat spot so that they could have the tower at the bottom, the media tower. They could have that stage that they had. They could have the corral of fans. They also had the big air jump, which was a massive pile of dirt that had scaffolding. We'll get into that as well. But yeah, the infrastructure, the whole concept, I think it seemed really good on paper. I don't know if it worked out necessarily as well as they'd hoped, but they did get 10 hours of training, which is more than they'd ever get in an event. 3 separate days, 4 hours, 3 hours, 3 hours. I mean, yeah. Granted,
Yeah.
the training days was blown out.
And the course, like kind of like you're saying too, the course was straightforward. You know, like I mean, the initial renderings of what that Olympic course was going to look like I mean, there was a full-on half pipe in it initially, but then without doing some test events, it made sense to play it safe. And obviously, I feel like it's kind of nice when they get to play it safe like this and just build a straightforward course with just gnarly features that are like hard to complete. It just shows which skiers really do truly stand out. You know, like they just get to do their best. And like ultimately, I think you just touched on training. Training, I think at that amount was to their detriment. You know, like I
Agreed.
think that there was one crazy training day where it was snowing on day one absolutely beautiful training day that was just perfect, where everyone did everything. Generally, the level of riding that I thought to understand in slopestyle was bumped up a level that day, and the stuff that I was assuming I was about to see in runs come the competition were going to be so groundbreaking if the level of practice that I had seen lived up to it, and we had more days like that. Then we go into another really tough training day, but still pretty good, before we get into the women's contest, which I guess we did women and men qualifying both in the same day.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and that was, I mean, pretty heavy competition right out the bat. I mean, I think you could see Matilda and Eileen like clearly gunning for like trying to put down very complete runs top to bottom. Kirsty Muir just like, again, she's been skiing so well this year, and coming into slopes, she was skiing really strong, putting together good rail lines into really heavy jump portions. Megan Oldham, obviously, like those four really were kind of looking like they had a really complete, strong shot at this. I think Sarah Hofflin, she was about to put down a run. Unfortunately, she flew out of her ski in qualifying, but I think the writing on the wall for what Sarah was going to try to do was going to be rivaling what Mathilde was doing in a 3 double run, which would have been really cool had she landed and made it into finals. That was a really close one, but she was, I mean, other than that, like it was really the people you'd expect to make finals at an event where you had to clutch up. Eileen crashed run 1. Had to go up run 2, put it down, toned it down a little bit. But again, the way that we had been seeing him training, we knew it was going to go down for finals. In that afternoon, we went right into the men's contest. And this is another one where I feel like, I mean, this was a really high level of riding. But Burke came out, first rider, first run, landed the run that would not be beat for the entire day. And then Andre came out right behind him, put down another really solid run. And then there was a lot of mistakes and stuff holding people back, and ultimately in slopestyle again, when we bumped to this event in all fields, it was 12 people to finals. At World Cups, it's generally 8 to 12 or something like that. So it was an extended start or finals list. Like you had a higher probability making it to finals, especially when you look at in the Olympics specifically with the nation quotas. Like maybe the U.S. riders, if there was, you could allow 8 of them, there would be 8 in the top 20.
Yeah.
That you only get the 4 that qualified into the Olympics. So it's a bit easier to make that 12 cut than maybe it would be at a normal World Cup, specifically so in men's pipe, more than anything. But still, like, so the right people made it into the final, but it just through the qualifying, it was just Burke put it down, Andre put it down. Then there was a lot of mistakes, people kind of having to pull up clutch last minute to put something down to make it into finals. But still, again, really promising based on the level of what we saw. After that qualifier, we had another full day off course, which was the practice day for finals. So it was only the 24 people that had qualified into finals getting to ride that course. And it was another just pristine day, beautiful conditions. You and I spent the majority of it on that TV tower on the side of it, just watching kind of the madness that was going down on the rails. And realistically, after that moment, I was ready to see some unprecedented stuff going down on the rails. If the course had continued at that rate, the show that we would have seen for the men specifically. The women, luckily, we got into day one. They had the full day for their final. After that, beautiful day, really good weather. Eileen coming out in run 1 and putting something down, and just like making the contest interesting right off the bat. Mathilde putting down runs as well, kind of establishing themselves as clear front runners in this. Just the level of difficulty that both of them were bringing top to bottom in the course. From an SBS standpoint specifically, which I know we can touch on after this, it's hard to beat. Like Eileen was coming with spinning in all 4 directions on the rails in finals, which is pretty unprecedented for any women's competition. Mathilde going with the 3 doubles on the jumps, which again, like she's just bringing a whole different level of what is possible in a jump line as far as these runs go. Doing a nose butter dub 12 in her run in the beginning of the day, it was really, really close between those 2 runs. Megan and Kirsty made a really cool race of 3rd place, and I think Kirsty, had she stood up a little bit more on that dub 10 on jump 2, I think she very well might have gotten that extra boost that she would have needed to overtake Megan, because her run was unbelievable, capping it off with the 14 at the bottom. Megan adding that switch double 12 in her run that she was doing pretty consistently that we then saw in Big Air. That was pretty groundbreaking in her jump line with the dub 12 to switch dub 12 combo. But yeah, again, it really came down to Mathilde versus Eileen. Ultimately, Mathilde's run was just like really unbelievable, just from a cleanliness perspective, variety, all the grabs locked in, the switch doubles in both directions, adding that switch 12. Ultimately, not doing the nose butter on her winning run, but still doing that dub 12 at the bottom. So just a really complete run. And Eileen's run, from a variety standpoint, really hard to beat, with the switch left by 09 blunt on jump 1 into the left dub 10 tail into the right dub 12 safety. Just 2 minor mistakes in her run, with like her not fully coming to the end of that down rail on the 4 on in the second rail pad, and then like really quick hand punch that probably to the OBS angle didn't look like much until they showed the back angle replay on the dub 12 at the bottom. But I mean, those 2 runs were incredibly close, probably the 2 best women's slopestyle runs I've seen to this point. They were really pushing each other. I can't wait for this continued momentum to finally align with Tess being there as well, and that's another reality of the Olympics is talking about the injuries that these people are playing through the pain. You know, the amount of
Yeah.
times I heard people talking about skiing through a knee injury just to be there at that stage is just not something you are familiar with in this sport. But this 4 year timeline really drives people to try to be there on that day, regardless of whether or not they know their chance might be compromised because of that injury that they sustained.
Well, and yeah, I mean, for example, Rel Harwood with knee injury, surgery, came back, did the other one in Steamboat, which wasn't talked about until she was there, and then tried to gut through it, decided to pull out a slope style to focus on big air so she had a chance to ski. And yeah, so not exactly ideal for her, but it was a similar instance in the last Olympics for her getting injured right before and having to try to grit through it. But there was a lot of that. I mean, we've heard that through the years of a lot of injuries, some that haven't been talked about, some that still aren't talked about. If people don't not having either ACL and competing, and um, I mean Hunter Hess having broken his hand in training and continued to go, and the hematoma he had on his hip, and I mean we could go
Yeah.
different people.
I mean, yeah,
Um,
people don't want to sit out,
no,
and I think sometimes I get caught up watching mainstream sports and see how easily people will sit out for months
that's
with
just
seemingly.
basketball, Jason.
Yeah, it is basketball. I mean, hockey. I guess those guys are pretty tough.
Yeah,
Um,
guys and girls.
True.
Yeah,
But yeah, that the injury thing, it's kind of crazy at the Olympics, just knowing what some people are dealing with, and ultimately, yeah, whether or not people are able to put it down. It was a shame that Rel was hurt because she's been skiing so well and brings
mm-hmm.
such a cool different element to the competitions that just is like clearly coming from a different approach than a lot of these um some of the new big air skiers and slopestyle skiers that we're seeing. But yeah, women's slope done and dusted at that point. Crazy contest. I left really excited. We finished our first Olympic final. Very confident in the way it turned out. Obviously, it was a close call between Matilda and Eileen, which I think the scores even showed through SBS. If people were even really understanding of being able to break down those scores,
Oh,
given that information is not
one
given on OBS.
yeah, one that's what I was gonna say. One thing that I struggle with 2 days before the thing ever started, I was getting showed graphics packages, and they just showed section score, composition score, total score. And I asked them, "Oh, where's the section score graphic? Like, we need the one that shows each section score to actually show what they're doing." They're like, "Oh, we don't have that." It's like, well, we need it. That's the whole point of doing this, is so that people can understand this section gets this score, so on and so forth. It explains it to the people watching TV, but it also explains it to the athletes, so on and so forth. And they didn't have it, and they had no interest in building one. I tried to explain to them for 2 days how important that was for the scoring system. For That's the whole point of doing it, and it wasn't really an OBS decision, from my understanding. It was more of a scoring an Omega decision where they didn't want to have to rebuild it. They said, this is what we've done in the past. And I said, well, it's not what we do at any World Cup. Every single World Cup has it. Every single other event that uses SBS has it. That's the whole point of doing it. And they basically said, okay, new guy, fuck
Yep,
off.
yeah.
So,
I mean, to be honest, I was even presented with this issue at the last Olympics because when I showed up as trick caller, the one thing that I understood is that what I said would be the thing published to the
right.
world to explain what the run was, which would have the score broken down and associated with it next to it to be able to explain the scoring system. Upon showing up to the Olympics and realizing that they don't do that for that broadcast, so what was my job for anyway? Ultimately, it ends up being the transcript that the riders are looking at to make sure that the judges saw the right stuff.
Yeah, you can look at
But
FIS Live. Like, you can look at the live scoring app and it has it there, but it wasn't on the graphic on TV, which was, I think, really detrimental for showing what you guys were doing, what everything meant. It just didn't, there wasn't the thing that the commentators could explain. Like, it sucked. And I think
exactly.
moving forward, I mean, 4 years from now we'll be in France. Hopefully I'll get to join and do the same thing I did at this one or in another entity. But I've explained to them, France, if SBS is still a thing, you got to have it. That being said, you can pull this clip up later if it's not there. So
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it seems counterproductive to the general understanding of the sport to have this complex
Right.
scoring system that is intended to give a broader perspective as to how the run was actually judged from a numerical standpoint, and they don't put it in there. So I mean, that just feels like a loss off the top. Like
Exactly. Yeah.
we have this system, but ultimately, like, the riders and coaches get that information, so it is something that they're working with, but still not used to its fullest ability there, which it seems to be the reason you'd want to do it, is to provide information
Yeah.
to the
On the world
viewership.
stage, on the biggest
Exactly.
world stage. Yeah. So,
But yeah,
men's.
well, I mean, I think we could talk about that at length too, and I'm really curious what happens with all of it, how snowboard feels about SBS as well after this
Yeah.
Olympics, because I think, like, if you're going to look at the one place that it might have gone different is in the way that the numbers were attributed to the bottom two jumps in SBS, and ultimately it's like the there's this is the system that they created from a
Yeah.
snowboarding standpoint, and we've been new to it and trying to figure it out and trying to hone it in to make it feel like it's an accurate representation of the sport, because of the complexities that we're dealing with on an individual feature basis are hard to keep up with from an overall impression standpoint. But is this hitting the mark? Are there things that we can adjust to it to make it a more reliable tool for and scalable too? Like, it's really tough to score a contest completely differently in a way that you only get to do at the most prestigious competitions in generally in finals, because you're
Yeah.
so
Would you,
but
if it, I mean, just on that same topic, going back, would you rather have judged that event in overall impression? Do you think that the results, one, would have been the same? Two, do you think that you'd be more accurate and be able to show what is better for the sport in a slopestyle run with overall impression or SBS?
I think it's tough because in OI you're just trying to, like, take cumulative account of everything that happened in the run. And so SBS is like a very good way to make sure that credit is given for every single element in a technical manner, which I think sometimes proves to make competitions more standardized and less creative interesting. I feel like it's got from me, from my perspective, I didn't enter a score. I'm the head judge. I'm
Yeah.
sitting there in the back trying to make sure that my team of judges has what they need to be able to watch, understand what they're seeing, and associate scores that could correctly attribute the value of that trick compared to other tricks. The people that are judging a rail don't really feel a sense as to who won the competition. They watch the first two rails and they judge those rails, and they're totally accountable for those rails and understanding every single thing that was possible, that happened, that didn't happen, every mistake on those two features. But as to the scale of the entire competition, they don't really have any input, nor to any of the other sections outside of the ones that they're judged. So ultimately, I feel like it's tough to leave a competition as a scoring judge and really feel like you don't have a sense of who won, or it might have been different had it been 100% in your opinion through the entire run. So, like, ultimately I think OI is my favorite because it's just the gut check. You're discussing with that group of people whether or not you can validate, based on the objective criteria, this run going ahead of another one for these reasons. And it just, you have a conversation briefly, you come to terms with the decision, you move on. But SBS, you are watching things, you're understanding what's possible, you're punching in those numbers. Once the number leaves your tablet, you've lost control of the rank in the competition. It's turning into a math equation, and hoping that the numbers that you attributed to how difficult you thought that trick was in comparison to every trick you have seen and will see, which is unknown. So it's really
Yeah. Interesting.
complicated.
Yeah.
You lose the numbers. You hope that they're right, and then you just kind of live and die by those numbers, and then it spits out the equation that has the winner. I think ultimately you look at these things, and I think if you're watching snowboard women's slope specifically, if that's Judge OI, they forget about Zoe falling off that rail early because
True.
her run was so insane.
Good point.
Coco on the first rail is the only one she made a mistake. Her rails were chill, but her jumps were so.
Was it a mistake though?
She came off a tiny bit early, I think, on her first rail.
Oh, I thought so. From my impression of what she did on that first rail, she got on with the 180, then she slipped it to sideways and then brought it back. So she brought it to board slide and then brought it back. And I thought that that was completely on purpose. I don't know.
Maybe it was only my angle of it.
Okay.
Like I just was watching from the base and saw whatever they put on the screen there. But it wasn't like, I mean, again, her whether or not she had a mistake in her rails were by comparison less difficult, but her jumps were in comparison best of the day. So like in a traditional format in OI, I mean, when we both started judging and doing X Games, kind of, I mean, what you did on the last jump, I think, dramatically impacted your run so much more than what anyone was paying attention to on the rails.
To a certain extent, yeah. There was, depended on who was in the panel, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And like, I mean, it's hard not to when jumps to the end of the run. There's so high rotation that sometimes it's easy to get lost in the technical difficulty. But ultimately, we've reached a consensus that we want everything to be weighted and valued the same. So when rails and jumps are equal by definition based on these numbers, it's hard to argue with the fact that there are biases that come from watching jumps second and having like an overall. I mean, on the X Games course specifically, it's like generally the thing that people remember is what happened on the last two jumps. Like the rail tricks, only for the people that are really paying attention. You know?
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too. Like I look at the SBS format, and this is maybe a question too that you can clarify. The section judges, do they only get to see the shots on their features? They don't get to see the rest of the run?
They do get to see the rest of the run, but once their feature comes up, they're in their best interest to just start scoring and comparing.
Right, okay. I wasn't sure if it was like they just get these shots and then...
No. I mean, we have a pretty free-flowing working system in the judges booth, which I think is like very imperative to the success of what we've been able to achieve in there. Like I was very impressed with the level of calmness that I had from my judging panel at this event, because I mean, it's the Olympics. Like no matter how much you want to treat it like a regular competition, you understand that the level of discourse about this competition is unparalleled. You gonna visit?
Danny just brought me soda water. You know, I was drinking beer, so she like tried to change my
trying to sober you up.
Yeah. Well, and I get that, and I think a lot of that comes from your preparation with that panel and the understanding that this is a serious job that they're coming into. You guys were all so prepared, and I'm not comparing this to snowboard, even though you could take it however you want. But you guys came in prepared, knowing what was possible, what tricks could be done by each skier. You dedicated so much time to watching practice, to understanding each rider and what they were capable of, not to judge them against themselves, but to not be surprised, where you weren't in a situation where you're shocked, you don't know what to do with it because it's something that you had no idea was going to happen. And I think so much of that footwork, that groundwork that you laid and prepared. I mean, I came into your guys' hotel, I think it was the night before slopestyle, and you guys were all sitting around talking about scenarios, running through scenarios of what happens if this, what happens if that. And I don't know if that's done in other panels. I do know that's not done in other panels. That hasn't been done in the past as much. I mean, back when I started with Steele, he would try to do this as much as he could to try to prepare us to know what we were expecting. That's how we were taught. Granted, I don't think it always gets done to the extent that it should. And it's not judging someone, like I said, against themselves, but it's just preparing the panel to be ready and not be surprised where you get something that happens and you don't know how to compare it. And I do appreciate how much work and how professional you guys were in that instance. And on that same note, to give you guys some more pats on the back or whatever, the amount of people that I've worked with that sat in your booth during the Olympics, and these are people from other walks of, whether snowboarding, whether they're media, whether they're other people we've worked with in other realms. They sat in that booth, and every single time they came out of there, they talked about how dialed you guys were and how the conversations were always on point and how you knew exactly what you were seeing. You knew exactly what you were going to do with it. You prepared yourself in a way that things were going to go without surprise and without chaos. So good job.
Appreciate it. That was, I feel like terrifying almost because again,
Yeah.
at the Olympics, like what's happened in the past, like specifically to snowboarding. I feel bad for those guys right now because they're reliving a nightmare for a lot of those guys that they've been on a bunch of Olympics, and this seems to be a set your watch by it every 4 years kind of thing.
Well, maybe that's a sign. Maybe that's a move on, and we can leave it at that. But
yeah, I feel like I was really stoked on the whole panel. Like I think everybody really understood as well, like that we were trying to do our best possible job for the sport. We put ourselves in that position where we're gonna try our best to evaluate the best of the best in the most high profile, high pressure situation. We just wanted to do our best, just really try to put our best foot forward. And I think my way to approach it, I guess, was just trying to over prepare, just and I think like specifically as we're talking about SPS with numbers, you do have to have a complete understanding of what's possible on an individual feature, or else you'll sell something short. And as we're talking about, that practice day before finals was unbelievable. Like some of the tricks that we saw done from some of the competitors would have been groundbreaking had done in competition, and that was what we were ready for. Shifted our expectation and all of our ranges, and then ultimately coming into finals day, the weather just was like the light was flat, the speed was scarce, and Burke came out and won it on his first run. He dropped last because he qualified first. He came out, he did the run that he had been practicing. Technical difficulty everywhere, very complicated rails, although maybe this is somewhere where I think we drew some heat from new schoolers specifically in terms of the way that the rails were rewarded. But ultimately, Burke's run is nuts, top to bottom. I think maybe Burke isn't I think ultimately in the Olympics, people are going to complain about anything. It really doesn't matter what
we saw that in Big Air. So
we saw that in Big Air. And I think that was something too that I also tried to get in the heads of the judges, like, hey, nobody's going to 100% agree with what we do. We just have to like make sure that we're staying true to the format that's been set in place, because all of these judges throughout the entire preseason and all of last season were on more contests than anyone else, getting ready, watching, and preparing to be in that situation. Like they're I'm not expecting them to be perfect, but I'm expecting them to be them, like in that situation, and be able to understand what they're about to see because of all of this observing that we've been doing, And Burke's run, unbelievable, top to bottom. A-Hall's run, also really, really impressive. Dude's just
being dude.
Just being dude. A-Hall's run, unbelievable from a rail technicality difficulty standpoint. Just really one of the most difficult rail runs that have been done, with the switchtails 2 onto that first DFD, which was kind of a no-go non-starter for the majority of competitors.
That was a D up D. That was, from seeing it next to it, that was an up and taller than me, so like above 6 feet on that second kink. Like it was massive, like high. It was
massive. And I mean, again, for like the build being relatively simple for the Olympics, a lot of the features were not low consequence. And I saw some insane crashes that I was astounded to see people walk away from. None worse than the gold medalist Burke, who tried to replicate Jesper's flip trick onto that teardrop rail and got body bagged worse than I've seen anybody.
It was so bad. I don't know how he bounced
totally
out.
Fun.
He definitely didn't try it again after that. But
he did not try it again. We waited all day for him to try it again. He did not. But Alex and Luca both putting down insane runs. Luca with a really unbelievable jump run, like only maybe losing just a little bit based on the grabs that he was doing, kind of getting that Cindy grab in there a little bit, which again has been another point of
Well, and
conversation.
it's funny too, because we talked about this after that contest, and if you don't get the Esco, it's Cindy. Because your right hand ends up going a little bit further back behind that heel piece because your left hand, or vice versa, I guess, your second hand that's crossing over goes in that normal safety position. So if you're not getting that crossover for the Esco, you're kind of doing a Cindy.
And I mean, like, no disrespect to any of these guys doing that, or when we're calling it a Cindy, because ultimately the level of riding that we're expecting from these people is sheer perfection. So like Luca slipping his hand back behind the heel piece and doing a grab that we determined up against two of the best runs we've ever seen and some of the hardest tricks we've seen on any feature all day, had some slight room to be taken away from. That's what this sport comes down to. It's a game of inches. You know, those top three runs, it really could have gone any way, and like ultimately it ended up being the visibility we had on the grabs, a shorter than usual grab on the first jump on the switch 18 Japan. How could you manage?
Yeah.
And then just the grab position on the last two jumps, which ultimately were enough to take him slightly below. Obviously, A-Hall, tremendous rail run, jump run, always really creative, finishing off that switch right tail butter dub, 9 set double Japan, pull back to 7. That might be the longest one I've ever really tried to describe. We kind of like, I guess he did have one small hand touch on his dub 16 on jump 1, and then his tail butter on jump 2 specifically was a point of conversation as to like how much do we reward for a tail butter done in this way. Like, again, it's A-Hall. You tend to give them the benefit of the doubt. Like, all of these riders are such amazing skiers that you tend to give them the benefit of the doubt when they say they're trying to incorporate something that's such a fast-paced, tight detail that honestly on the slopestyle course we weren't really 100% prepared to see with the level of definition needed to know if it's 100% a butter. What is the definition of a butter? How much angle has to be incorporated? So how much we credited him for the butters, I guess, was another thing.
Well, and that was yeah, sorry to jump in, but that was one that we had the takeoff replay for, Mega Mode replay, and I asked for it and we put it in the package. And I saw it and I was like, oh, maybe that was just pre-spin. So it was definitely one that from my perspective watching it, I was like, maybe he wasn't trying to butter it. Maybe he kind of, as Evan McEachran said, you know, that's how I spin all my 18s. And they just kind of slip a little bit.
Yeah.
But
and
I mean,
think that just kind of carries like the tone that we've been trying to carry into the jump skiing is like, we have room for this stuff. All of these wild and crazy things that people are trying on jumps. Like, we don't want to limit it. If people want to bring it to the table, we want to see it. However, if there's an element that we understand, we're going to scrutinize it to the best of our ability, because it's not fair to reward something because of the concept that it was as much as the way it was actually done.
Right.
So that's something we're just trying to be really strict on. And that was, as you're saying, maybe not that defined. Maybe we could go back and forth about it. But again, those 3 runs really stood out. Andre coming in with just another heartbreaking one with another 4th place at this Olympics, putting down run 1, which was a really solid score for a while. But then ultimately the other 3 between Burke, Alex, and Luca came along and just put down runs that had a little bit more substance to them. Andre obviously was aiming to go back in a later run and add to it, like put down his foundation run, probably by run 2 or 3, be able to put down something that where he could let it all loose. And he never ended up putting it down through the entire course. So that was obviously heartbreaking just to finish 4th in 2 in a row. But like ultimately, I think like the podium really could have gone any way. Maybe in OI, people would have seen it differently. Maybe based on the OBS feed, people saw the mistakes that we saw less than the way that we saw them. But like, again, another contest that regardless of the feedback we got, I felt confident in the way that my team handled the contest, you know?
Right. And I think this would be a good time to, since we were talking about the Cindy Grab and since it has been posted about and talked about, the Cindy Grab was something that a panel that I think I was on as well with you, we came up with, um, because and I think it may have just even been in conversation as well. We needed to name the grab that people were doing to pull themselves through a spin. It wasn't a true safety because it was behind the heel piece, but it wasn't a true tendy because it wasn't far enough out on the tail. It was that gray area in between, and it wasn't done as a grab to show control. It was a grab that was being used to help rotate a spin through.
The
Uh,
grab that you held to have a hand on a ski to
right.
say that you grabbed the ski, like the most. And I mean, exactly that. Like we started calling it the Cindy, between safety version of Tindy, which I think Colby West actually did the best job of explaining it on that recent
Yeah.
little news
Yeah.
report. But I mean, it was meant as a diss
Yeah.
almost,
Yeah.
like Tindy would be. I mean, if I'm reading a trick report and I'm the person that's putting those tricks in, and I say Tindy or toxic, you didn't cap your ski. Like I'm not
Yeah.
gonna, I'm
Well,
not gonna.
and the funny conversation that's come about afterwards is like, well, what about Mick D in 2007 U.S. Open switched 10 over the channel Tindy? That was a different time. Yes, it was
Straight
super
up.
cool at the time, and he did it with style. And Henrik used to do the sausage, which was a Tindy. And yes, there have been different points in time throughout skiing history where doing a grab, whether it's perfect or not, and that being kind of the Tindy pull through grab has been fine. But at this point in skiing, there are better grabs than others. And I think Tindy, Toxic, Cindy are in that versus safety, blunt, Cuban, so
I
on
mean,
and
there's so many grabs, and I mean, so Cindy came about when people started going from 12 to 14 to get that next rotation about, and they figured that they have to do the arch of their back anyway, but if they're holding a grab, it doesn't matter where on the ski they slide their hand back to, it'll set them up for the next flip.
exactly.
It's the grab that like clearly shows I've just learned this trick. I haven't gotten to learning a harder grab with it yet. That would be really difficult, don't you think? It is. I mean, this is the tricky thing. Is like we see it done. The technical merit of what they're doing is still impressive, and like I fundamentally believe it's not that it's a bad grab. It like shows that you don't care about the way that it looks, and there is a way to make it look good. That's just not what we're seeing a lot of times. But ultimately, like if they're doing, I mean, Gepper, for example, in half pipe, he's doing a right dub 16 Cindy. That's a Cindy. There's no way to cut it and say that it's anything other than a Cindy. It is like,
and it's used to pull through. It's used to pull that spin through. Yeah.
He's holding that grab for 900, maybe 1080 of a 16. That's the longest grab duration out of anyone in that trick.
Besides maybe Henry Silver.
Yeah. Which again, like unbelievable props to Henry for doing that. We'll touch back on Big Air. But he's doing a grab. Gepper's grabbing his ski for a large amount of the rotation. He's grabbing the hell out of that grab. A grab that I find to be undesirable, but who am I to be the judge of style? Obviously, we've kind of been given by the riders the ability to reward when somebody does something insane, but they don't really want us to hold it against them when they do Cindy grab specifically, which I don't love. Like, I think it could be cool if there was like more of a hard line on that it's just like, but at the same time, like to each their own, and everyone's definition of style might not be mine.
But I think that, go ahead.
Well, ultimately, there's grab positions that we are holding these people accountable for at the level that it has become one of the most technical sports you can even imagine. So, like when a grab position ends up being the deciding factor between two things, so be it.
Right. And I think you look at these tricks specifically in halfpipe, the 16s. Everybody learned the 16 with a Cindy, and then everyone has tried to graduate out of it. It's the first grab they did to be able to pull it through. You look at Finn, he goes to mute. It's obviously harder. You look at Alex, who goes to lead tail. It's obviously harder. Henry Silderud now doing blunt. I mean, it shows a better body position. It shows better control. It shows that you're not using the grab to pull the spin through. And it seems like once they learn the trick, then and it's same in Big Air. If like first switch stub 18s are all Cindy, and then I can do it with blunt now. I can do
Exactly.
it now, and it changes it because you're not using that grab to pull through the trick, and it's obvious if they miss the grab and then they can't finish the spin because they're not pulling. I don't know. That's just my 2 cents or take on it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not that that grab can't be cool, because I mean, we were fighters for Stinkbug and Liu Kang and Breeby,
Pretty
but
hot knee,
it's
still
the fact
grab.
that most of the people that are doing it aren't doing it to make it look cool. They're doing it to
Right.
get something down
Right.
to their feet, you know, and thus
And-
it's something that it gets brought up, and then now there's this whole conversation about that that's not even a grab. It's like, no, it's not. I mean, it's a grab body position kind of combo. I really try to be generous with not calling stuff Cindy, but sometimes that's kind of the only way to try to get it across to them that we saw something that, like, ultimately, you know, is the grab option that would be less preferred, you know.
Well, I think it's funny, some of the comments. I'm talking specifically about like the new scores post, and it's like some of the big names from back in the day in skiing are like, that's not a grab. You can't just make up grab names now. Well, yes, actually you can. That's part of the progression in skiing. That's part of what I mean, and I'm not just saying us specifically. Like we've had to name some things because things have happened and we've gotten to as a joke with the meter grab and stuff. But yes, there are different things that come about. People do things different. The Buick grab wasn't a thing 5 years ago, and then or 6 years ago, and then it became a thing. I mean, and to say, I mean, it's a weird old head gatekeeping thing. Some of these comments of that's not, it's a tendy. Well, no, it's not. It's in between.
Yes,
That's the reason. That's the reason we defined it as a Cindy, is to set that difference. A tendy is a completely different grab. It's a
exactly
foot of space on the ski that shows a different grab. If you're out further on that end, yeah, it's maybe not capping blunt, but it's not using that ski as much to pull yourself through.
right. I mean, ultimately, you don't want us naming grabs. Stop me. I think we
digress a bit, but
an hour with slope and other things. So I guess we can kind of get into big air now. Like, again, with the Olympic schedule, it was pretty interesting because, like, slopestyle, we had 3 full days of practice, then the combined qualifying day, then a complete off day, then a women's final day, then a men's final day. And then we go right into big air, which is another 3 full days of practice, for which our schedules were offset. Slopestyle, we were there like all day during the daytime. Obviously, slopestyle competed at day, but for big air, it was all at night. All the practice sessions started at 7:30, some going till 11 p.m., where we were kind of killing time, skiing when some of us had the chance. Obviously, the pass situation that's been spoken on was less than ideal, but ultimately, I think most of us ended up getting the pass and taking at least a day or two up there to go ski the mountain, because we did have nothing to do until the afternoons. Although the lunch at the hotel touring was unbelievable that we had interchangeably with the dinner there.
And the pass situation, bummer that we didn't just get to ski the mountain and everything, but the 10-pack for 240 euros, so you could ski $24 or euros a day, and in return whatever you didn't use and get cash back. Pretty good deal. Can't find that anywhere in the States.
Best deal you can imagine.
Yeah.
When it's 20% of your daily rate, then you're like
fair. But I mean, the rail park, everything about that place. The mountain was huge.
It was massive, and got some good snow while we were there.
Yeah.
Which slopestyle, it kind of was just like some intermittent cloudiness, but then getting into big air, we saw some weather shifts. Again, yeah, the schedule starting at night, so we just would go over there in the evening to watch the practices. So yeah, the big air starting at like 6 o'clock is when we go over there. We'd hang out and just kind of watch. Training was absolutely nuts throughout the whole thing. Just some of the tricks we saw done with some regularity that we weren't expecting, specifically because snowboarding had the first big air on that, and that was a jump that seemingly dramatically affected what people were able to do. Like, we know that a 23 is possible on a snowboard. We know that 21s are starting to be more regular. We didn't see any of that. Or 121, maybe it was.
Yeah.
it just the contest for the men ended up being more about what people didn't land than what was landed.
It was boring.
It was, as Todd Richards said.
I didn't think it was boring.
Yeah, I mean,
I enjoyed it.
I was standing at the bottom talking to the guy who was the snowboard trick caller, and I was like, "You think that this contest is kind of boring, don't you think?" And he's like, "What do you mean? No, not at all." Like, and then like a couple riders later, he's like, "You're kind of right. Yeah, nobody's landing. It is boring."
Yeah.
And I mean, the riding, the stuff that was landed, unbelievable. The women showed up for this, but like to not get stuck too much on the snowboarding side of it, we weren't sure what to expect when we got the skiers onto the jump. However, I had confidence that the skiers were not going to let the jump size affect what they were going to do at all, and they lived up to it, both through training, then through qualifying. Obviously, for the women, the qualifying was like pretty straightforward, and some real heavy hitters emerged. Obviously this is an Olympics without Tess Ledoux. She would have been a key player in it, but it really there was a pack at the top that looked to be making this really competitive. And then the women's final absolutely went off, and that was a contest that I really didn't expect to happen with the way the weather was coming in.
Well, you'll have to send me the picture you have of the snowstorm from out of the booth where you couldn't even see the big air jump, which was maybe 100 yards away.
It's unbelievable. We were waiting for the weather delay in there, and we thought the half pipe lights had turned out because half pipe practice was happening simultaneously to the women's big air. And we couldn't see the half pipe because the snow was so dense. It wasn't even that windy. But then ultimately it blew off and was totally fine for the competition. And we saw a really high level women's big air. However, in practice, during some of those snowy conditions, Mathilde went down. She wasn't able to start the contest after qualifying in first place.
Mathilde and Anouk, the other Swiss.
And Anouk, yeah. So that was a notable absence in that field. Not having Mathilde, you saw what she brought to slopestyle. You saw that nose butter dub 12. Ultimately, it was the nose butter that caught her up a little bit in training. Very happy actually to find out that she was just doing okay after that. I mean, she was pretty banged up because the crash was brutal. Ultimately, like the contest ended up going off. Still, Laura Wolf doing at least the cleanest switched up Bio 12 I've ever seen done from that field
to start the comp too.
Yeah, just kind of right out the gate, coming in with the switched up 12 or switched up Bio 12, new rotation. Really cool, but I mean, ultimately, like the only thing we could take away from her with this was it was on the low trajectory side.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, I think that could have been a score that really blew the roof off. That trick done with
she still got amplitude. Like a 92, 93. It was still up.
Exactly. She still got rewarded for it. But ultimately, like that. I mean, that's a really groundbreaking trick for the field to see them doing that. Really, like Megan came out swinging right away, lacing that switch dub 12, getting her dub 12 really proper, just like kind of taking some pretty strategic approaches like on her trick selection. That switch 12 is still very progressive. On her last run, when she had already solidified the gold medal, going for that switch dub 14 mute and just barely missing it. But that trick was unbelievable. Megan has so much style, and like I mean, I think I was hoping maybe a couple years ago when she did the first triple at X Games that was going to be another staple in the big air repertoire. Ultimately, that seemed to be a one and done thing so far, but still, like the way that she's progressed and how she's skiing, from getting bronze over in slope to coming in skiing so well to take away gold in big air and do it pretty convincingly, if I might add. It was really cool to see Megan double medal there. I think I really appreciate her style and what she's bringing to it. Eileen having to clutch up on the last run and land something. She got her dub 14 out of the way, but then kind of whiffed the grab and run 2 for her dub 12 blunt. And again, not looking at Toxic, not looking at Tindy. We're looking for her attempting to cap her ski on that one because that's clearly what she's aiming for. Ultimately, on her final run, she got that tail pretty good, maybe a little bit on the inside of the hook, but still held the grab for a substantial amount of the trick. Dub 12 tail, tail, if you want to say you want to give credit. Very progressive for this field, the grab selection, not just Cindy. And then it really again was between Kirsty Muir, who got fourth in slope, like after having a small mistake, versus Flora Tabinelli, who again, another person skiing with an injury.
Yeah.
We haven't seen her in any contest leading up to it. She did have some issues with her knee earlier in the year. I'm not 100% sure as to the full extent of what she had going on. But for her to come out and ski so well with the switch dub 10 and then doing the big double 14 and then double 16, I think was just really cool to see her put those down. Her dub 16, one of the biggest tricks of the night. That was what ended up bumping her up onto that podium. Kirsty just went for, on her last run when she was in a position to try to come back and overtake Flora, ended up going for a dub 16 blunt and just kind of right off the top not getting a hold of the grab, which just led to a really wild axis. But massive props for her going for that. Like that would have been unbelievable that she actually stepped to a dub 16 like cap tail of any type in that type of high level rotation. Like obviously she had a really nice 16 earlier in the contest, but up against it again, these four runs were just really impressive from all of them. And like again, to shout out Laura for the switched up bio 12 that I think was right up in that mix, but maybe not having a technical enough B trick to be able to really stand up against that group. It was a really good show, and like something that I really, again, with the weather leading up to it, that we can share that picture. I wasn't expecting it. Then spent the next day preparing. Like Ben's Big Air is the one to be worried about. You know, this is the one that is coming at you so fast, and really if you're not prepared and understanding what the parameters of what you're going to see, you will miss something. You know, Big Air is when they add that extra bit of rotation that you didn't think was physically possible. So if you go in with an expectation of what you're going to see, you need to adjust the caliber, understanding that you're at the Olympics, and this seemingly is the one that people just want to do something unprecedented at a clip that has never before been done in competition. The weather was terrible coming into this. Like I fully thought it was going to get canceled. It was looking pretty dicey as to whether or not the men's contest was going to go. And then it started, and the weather was terrible. And I was unsure if we were going to be able to continue the competition because of how hard it was snowing.
And it was crazy so I was in the bottom watching, because luckily I didn't have to work Big Air. So I got to watch women's and men's Big Airs. And I was at the bottom, and I was thinking to myself, how are they skiing in this? Much less, we see the replay, and it's like, how can the judges see what they're doing, especially when they slow-mo on those replays? And I think that's what you're getting at, is you couldn't break down what you wanted to because the snow was falling so hard.
Luckily too, this is where the OBS replays really did help us, because like some of those uptight replays and super slow-mo were the only thing that I could actually clearly read a definition of when a grab was entered and exited in these tricks, which in a Big Air tends to be a lot of it, you know? And like this Big Air too, like just from the get-go, this was the most groundbreaking Big Air I've been a part of, I've ever seen. This was like the most electric ski competition I feel like I've ever gotten to be in the booth to witness happen. This was the level of intensity, the understanding of what we thought we were going to see, paired with the disappointment of what we believed we were going to see because the conditions were so dramatically affected. And then for it to end up being that nobody cared about the weather and everyone was just going to go in to the fullest of their ability, and this is going to be just an insane show. This was the perfect night, you know,
it was so cool, like standing at the bottom. I'm standing with Evan McEachran and a few other people just watching, and Luca goes down and takes it to the bottom line in that dumping snowstorm. Like, I don't know how he could see. I don't know how he had that much speed, and just stomps on the last line. It's like, oh, so this is what we're doing.
Yeah,
okay,
this is gonna go.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Yeah, and even through practice, I was unsure, but when they started skiing, it really was just like so clear that nothing was going to stop them, you know? And T-Pod starting out right away with his switch right trip 19, getting safety and trying to kind of touch Esco, which kind of ended up being probably the source of him not getting fully rewarded on that, was like the late short Esco touch, as well as kind of a pre-spin, like unloading a little bit early on the takeoff of that one in a Switch 19. Again, no disrespect, I'm not doing this, but when we're really comparing the finite details of these things, that's kind of what it came down to on that trick. Burke coming out Switch trip 21. I don't think I've ever seen him do that and get the grab like that proper in a competition before. Just absolutely laced run one. Ralphie coming out with the Switch trip 18 Japan, which he's just kind of made super regular. So we're getting some landed tricks happening. And then you get to the top of the pack where it just started to go nuts. Like, I guess obviously one thing to point out, being in Italy, Miro did not make the final. He was somebody that we were expecting to be a real player in this competition. He went for the dub 21 twice in qualifying and just never quite got it, crashing on both of them. And after his Switch 19 capped blunt perfect that had set him up pretty well, wasn't able to round it out. So
that was that was the other thing I forgot to bring up, is that qualifying had 2 jumps scored out of 3, as opposed to what most World Cups where you can get in with 1 good jump. That was a huge difference going into this, is having to have the combined score like you normally do in finals.
Totally, yeah.
Format. So you can't just get in on your one like banger and then hope to piece it together. So it kind of cut the field differently than it normally would at a World Cup, it seemed like.
Totally, yeah. And I mean, they've been trying to do that with more regularity at World Cup, specifically both the ones in China this year, but it ultimately does come down to the weather, the place they're doing it, and the format. But you do see a different group of people that can put down 2 versus that can put down 1. Martin Norquist, the Swedish skier that like probably most people haven't been familiar with watching him in any competitions, came out and skied like his life depended on it with the Switch trip 18 and Ford trip 19 and qualified. You know, like this is anyone's game in a 2-trick format.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that was on anyone's bingo card, but he was skiing out of his mind. Like the qualifier was nuts. The level of skiing that we saw demonstrated at the qualifier, like led us to believe that we are about to see something truly unprecedented in this final, which through the blizzard was already starting to transpire. You know, Max starting as the number 1 qualifier, having all these people drop before him, Luca dropping the Switch trip 19 Esco, getting hooked up for it. I'm trying to think who, Matei going for his hand drag triple 19, which like, how do you even think that that's a trick that's possible in any way, shape, or form? Like for us, maybe it came down to it being a little bit less, like maybe the hand drag could have been a little bit more defined, and maybe that trick is a 100 compared to what we gave it. But still, like the level of difficulty in that trick, just so complicated. Orm coming in with his now, like, I mean, this is seeming to be regular for him, but I mean, make no misunderstanding of the fact that it is not a regular thing to be able to carve into a nose butter, into a double bio rotation, and let alone take it to 14, holding like perfect proper safety with massive amplitude on this unpredictable jump. Torm just setting a standard as to like what's possible with that trick. That was something that if we ever do touch on the X Games thing, maybe we criminally undervalued that trick, because what I'm hearing from the community and watching from the way that people are appreciating it in real time, that trick stood out as something that needed to be rewarded heavily in comparison to some of these massive rotations that we were seeing starting to happen in this competition.
Well, yes and no. I think it was valued maybe appropriate at X Games because it wasn't done as well as it was at the Olympics. He didn't go as big. He landed really high at X Games on the landing. So maybe that's like a couple little differences there. But it was, oh man, it was such a fun show. It was the fastest a 3-run format from a spectator for me has ever gone. I was just sitting there like, oh my gosh, this is going.
It was just going. And also because you had the people at the bottom of the order dropping hammers every single time. Torm, Mac, and Matei all landed all 3 jumps. T-Pod had to bring it to the end to get his. Luca couldn't put it down on 2 of them. It was, people were going hit for hit. I mean, this is the cool thing about the ski show. There were so many lands, Torm comes out and does that carving nose butter, dub bio 14. Then at that point, I think Burke qualified in the top 3. He did his switch trip 21. Then Mac comes out and does the most flawless switch trip 21 I have ever seen. Like, grab, went massive on the jump, and we've got a game here. Like, this is about to get really intense in the level of competition that just kind of got thrown upon us.
So we go into third run, and it's a re-rack. So they re-rack the order based on how the scores are. So if you're in first place after 2 runs, you go to the end, so on and so forth. And we're looking through, because I'm a nerd. I had live scoring up on my phone as I'm sitting in the bottom so I can keep track of where things are at. And I'm looking through, I'm like, 4 guys can threaten the podium. That's it.
Yeah.
And Connor Ralph being one of those ones, we're like looking at Ralphie, Ralphie can get third with 103.
Exactly.
Like,
yeah.
Like, oh, and he goes down and laces his first ever trip 21 mute, perfect to the bottom, gets a great score for it, and he's in fourth.
Exactly, and there's just nowhere he can go for that.
Yeah, exactly.
That he took out Teapot in that scenario, who had done a switch to 19
right after.
Exactly, who then bumped him out. But I mean, again, the level
bumped
of
him out for fourth.
Then took fourth. Just the level of competition was unbelievable. The weather cleared up a little bit after after the first one, and then ended up being pretty nice by the end of it. But nose butter trip 19s apparently just a regular thing now. Matt Roach just making them look so good, and if we're holding everyone to the caliber of nose butter that he's doing, he's genuinely doing it on a different level than anyone else is on the jump right now. Dylan Deschamps coming in with his switch trip, Misty 16, clearly going for a quad on his final jump, but then ultimately realizing he didn't have the airtime.
Missed the snap.
Missed the snap a little bit, but the chillest trip you've ever seen in your entire life. Luca just not like getting that switch trip 19 out the gate, not being able to get the Ford trip 19 Esco landed clean in the competition, which kind of took him out of the equation. Ralphie getting that trip 21, first time he's probably ever even thought about trying that. So sick to see him do that. I know he was pent up a little bit from slope. He wanted to have a little bit better showing. He knows what he's capable of, and for him to come out and like Ralphie, I don't think he's ever told anyone he's a big air skier. I've always considered him as a slope style skier, and for him to second in Steamboat this year and a 5th place in the most competitive big air contest I've ever seen, that's a tremendous accomplishment. Teapot ultimately coming in, doing his thing with his trip 21. But again, ultimately, only enough for fourth, because the tricks that we were dealing with in the top 3 were just genuinely never been done, never been comprehended before. The scores that we are going to, this is like the closest to 100 I think I've ever really played so lightly with from a scoring perspective. But based on our conversation beforehand and what we understood the contest could possibly be if everything lined up, the only thing that we genuinely didn't think was possible was the nose butter trip 21. Everything else we expected, we understood what we were going to do with it. We kind of had it played theoretically as to the level of execution with it paired with the level of what it actually is. And like ultimately, if Mac flexes his skis the way Matt Roach does on his nose butter 19 on that 21, we don't have enough points to be able to get. It would have to be like 115 compared to everything else that we saw. No disrespect to that trick. Like that was one of the best big air tricks I've ever seen. But again, if we're really looking at the finite details, if he incorporated a flex like that, like I think it would have absolutely blown the roof off of what we gave. But again, between Matei, who came into that switch tail butter trip 21. Like he did at X Games last year again, and bumped himself back up over Mac, who was already sitting in second, and then put him in third. Then Mac coming up and having to do that nose butter trip 21, bumping into first. And then Torm, who now has done the carving nose butter right dub bio 14 safety, flawless, massive, just so fun to watch. Then with his B trick going to the switch tail butter right dub bio 16 safety, massive, perfect. Only time that it had been done before in a contest was in qualifying by Elias Surya, who just had a couple execution issues that we weren't really able to reward him to his fullest potential. But the evolution of that trick from going to 12 last year, then to 14 as he progressed with it more, to now get into the 16 axis, again, just cannot highlight so much how difficult that is. Setting him up to be the top qualifier going to the last run after the Matei and Mac shuffle with the switch trip 21, then Mac coming and doing the nose butter and bumping up into first. Torm has to land his last run. There's a no victory lap scenario for which then he does the flawless, I mean, most effortless I've ever seen, carving nose butter dub 16 safety. Perfect spot in the landing, so quiet landing. Just, I mean, the general understanding from the way that trick had been scored previously that adding a 180 to it isn't going to blow the roof off, but it was going to be enough to be the improvement needed to go over Mac. Best big air contest I've ever seen. Those three made it an absolute show. Those were the three that I think probably were the most frustrated coming from slopestyle, because any one of those three could have won slopestyle if they put down the run that they were lining
from
up.
The practice the day before.
Matei with the 5 swap. Mac was doing switch 6 P2. Torm was incorporating that carving nose butter into the run with just unbelievable rails, doing a nose butter spin on to
onto the cannon
off of the cannon. They were skiing amazing, and then the weather kind of got them. We didn't get to see their full pull, and then they went absolutely nuts in this big air. And it, like, the feeling in the judges booth after this was just buzzing. You know, we were so psyched. We felt like we did really good. We understood that there was debate too, like whether or not we rewarded Mac enough, but like ultimately I feel that was a really cool event for free skiing, you know,
well, and
to show what the sport is all about.
100%. And I think it's interesting. You look at the keyboard warriors afterwards and the comments and Mac got robbed, this and that. And we know, we saw afterwards Mac did an interview being like, I mean, tired of people saying you're always going to rob whoever's winning, so on and so forth. And at Cooper Davidson, who was there coaching, watching at the bottom with me, he said it the best, and I want to quote him on this. He said the progression is not linear. And if progression stays linear, then we push into aerials. And it's not always that progression of add a 180, add a 180. And I think that's a known thing, especially in our sport, is you have to go off in these other areas. But if you look at it in a graph and you go, Torm did something so up here and out of the ordinary with the nose butter dub bio 16, as opposed to going up here, just because he has less of a spin doesn't mean it's less difficult.
Exactly.
And I think, like, I heard comments like, well, so-and-so could go do that first try if they went out. Well, they're not. And they're not doing it at this level. And we've watched Torm do that trick over and over again in practice and mess it up over and over again. A different axis every time. It's not quite the same. And for him to go replicate that 3 times and improve on it in that big air, I mean, it was insane. And I think that's one of those things, is like, you can be as upset as you want about, yes, Mac did a groundbreaking nose butter 21, and it was electric. I was in the bottom, and it was just like, what did we just watch? But you can't always be like, oh, that extra 180, because then we get into that issue that I think snowboarding gets into, and I think other sports get into, where it's like, add a 180, boom, gold medal. And that's not what the sport wants. That's not what the athletes have pushed to say that they want. And it's not always about clearing the entire line of the big air jump too. It's about landing with control and having.
And ultimately, it's really funny because we get into, like, Mac won X Games with a 21. People said we only want spin to win.
Yeah.
Then we go into this, and then and I mean, like, again, props to the podium on this one. Matei, like, what Matei brought to the table, how stoked he was and embracing those two when they came down and put down other groundbreaking tricks. Mac treating it like such a champion, like having every opportunity to throw us under the bus and having every right to do so, you know, like, how do we really pair those two tricks up against one another other than our gut instinct and what we saw in that moment and the amount of sheer timing and precision it takes to be able to initiate from a nose butter a bio rotation. And that was our call in the day. But, like, Mac absolutely, like, I feel like he has handled all of the criticism, or not even criticism. Everyone thinks he's the best, but any question he's had, I've just had gained more respect for him than I, again, like, he's a good kid, but he's really done his best not to say that we should be thrown under the bus in this
Well, and
situation. And then,
it's just interesting, like you're saying, you do one thing and they only want spin to win, and I don't think that's necessarily the case. You guys have been very consistent this year with how you've scored Torm on that trick and how you've scored the 21s, and it's different with the nose butter 21, and it was a different contest, and it was such a fun show to watch. Like, if you actually take a step back and you look at the tricks that were done on that podium, and you think, what a diverse crew, what a diverse grouping of tricks, skiers, like what a good representation of the sport with this podium.
totally, yeah. And
So
I mean, I think Torm, as somebody for like to be a representation of what the sport is, that's a cool vision of what the sport looks like. I think like a lot of people love watching him ski, and he's really become one of the golden standards for how things can be done. Skiing still at a competitive high level, having to do rotations that you would think there's no way to make them look good, and continuing to find new creative outlets. Like this big air made the Olympics for me. It really was a shame that we didn't get to end on big air, and then we got into some more inclement weather, and then like obviously we dealt with some other stuff in half pipe. But so I guess big
it's
awesome.
get into pipe.
Got through the weather, but then the weather kept coming in. Ended up affecting the schedule. We were supposed to run men's qualifying in the morning and then women's qualifying in the evening. There was so much weather that morning that the men's contest was postponed and called off. We would proceed with the women's qualifier that evening. Then the following day, which was scheduled to just be the men's final in the evening, we would do the men's qualifier in the morning, the men's final in the evening, and then we would round out our Olympic schedule with the final evening, the last event in Livigno, women's halfpipe. Men's contest got canceled, so going into the women's contest, we got through the weather day. The weather was pretty fine. The level of riding was really good. Again, another situation where Eileen did not put it down on run one, and in this 2-run qualifying format where she's got all this pressure, she's clearly coming in as a favorite, and for her not to be sitting with a landed run when everyone after her just kept landing runs.
Yeah.
Lee, Zoe, Cassie, Amy, there were just so many people that landed runs that by the end of run one, when she got to come back up for her second run, it was really kind of land on your feet time, and ended up going with a pretty toned down version of her run where she just went 2 9s up top into a 7, switch 3, alley-oop, which qualified her, no doubt. Again, her level of skiing, the pipe specifically, the amplitude she's carrying, is at such a high level, but there were really good, complicated runs top to bottom from Indra, who storming onto the scene this year and just skiing so well, such a solid run, and just the only thing that she's lacking is amplitude. She's the smallest competitor, that's going to come. Cassie Sharp skied out of her mind, run one, putting herself in a pretty good spot in third after run one, then going into run two, and skiing even better than she had before, but then crashing on that 10 at the bottom, and ultimately ending her Olympic run at this one, which was a huge shame. Like, she's a recent mom that's coming back and skiing at this level, and like, again, that was the best run I had ever seen her do up until that point of her crash and her previous qualifying run. Like, her amplitude, the way she was riding that pipe, the switch hits that she had been incorporating into the qualifying, really, really cool to see from Cassie. But then Lee and Zoe just kind of going back and forth at the top, and where you would have thought Eileen, if she has to do a full pull, is probably in that top 3 connection. Eileen qualifies a little bit lower. Zoe is the number 1 qualifier. Moving into the finals day, that you've got that pretty well set. Then, so we finished the women's qualifier, ultimately kind of on a downer note, because Cassie's slam was pretty demoralizing for everybody. Like, we were really excited to see her skiing that well. It just really took a chunk out of the contest. But then going into the men's contest, and this is the contest that I've been building up probably in my head the most for the past year. Every time I see a contest where I'm like, oh, I know what they can do there, but they're not going to do it yet because they're saving it for one special week in Italy. And then ultimately, we didn't see what we thought we were going to see. Finley Melville Ives, first to drop in qualifying, crashes his first run, rips his ski off on his left alley-oop dub 10. Massive disadvantage to come in and out of a 2-run qualifier, not put something down. Maybe a little bit too hot out the gate because he literally looked like he was trying to win finals with his first 2 hits that he was doing. He went massive. His grabs were just ripped. Maybe he doesn't know that step back, but he went for it out the gate. He didn't land. Everyone else pretty much landed from that point on and put down a good base run, some that needed to improve on, some that had kind of solidified themselves in there with your key players that kind of made the cut. The big one from qualifying that was a big surprise was Luke Harold doing a really high level run that probably could have been in contention for the podium in finals, but then doing a big hand drag on his last 16 at the bottom of the run, which just was a pretty big mistake to overlook. So he still scored for it, but ultimately that was holding him back and made him very beatable. Then on his second run, doing a toned down version of that, and then losing a ski on his last trick and not being able to qualify on. Again, massive person not to have in. But again, the biggest one, current favorite in this contest, Finley, coming in on run 2, clearly understanding the situation, knowing that he needs to tone it down, but ultimately that flat light got him, and he did the right dub 12 and just fell out of the sky, and that held up the contest for a while. I know everyone was feeling a pit in their stomach because he's just such a ball of energy in that pipe, and to see him down like that, it was really worrying. Ultimately, again, hearing that he is doing well, just gutted not to be able to compete because he had some stuff to show the world. But with those 1 crash, and again, thankfully he's okay, hoping to get to see him ski again soon because he's on a completely another level. And then Luke not being able to put it down kind of shifted the landscape for that final that we were about to get into and gave us something that we weren't really expecting. Henry Sildaru really emerging too in that qualifier, and kind of shaking things up. He's been working on a run, and his technical difficulty and the perfection on the individual tricks that he's working on kind of just shined through. And it was him, Gepper, and Brendan McKay that did what it needed to qualify last. Ultimately going into that final that evening, the contest, it ended up being a good contest, I think, from a broadcast perspective, a TV perspective.
It crescendoed for sure, yeah.
But it felt weird to me, I think maybe I'm just so used to seeing something happening in these when Finn is in the mix and Luke is in the mix. And I was excited to see them ski, and ultimately everybody skied really well. Henry coming out, putting down a first place run for a while with his switch combo and the switch 12 to switch 10, getting a really nice blunt in that switch 10. Right 16 Japan, left 16 blunt into the left alley-oop 10 blunt. Just really good run, and really the only thing that held us back in that run and that amount of variety and technical difficulty that we're seeing from just rewarding that through the roof is a little bit on the amplitude side, specifically in the top of the run. His 16s are flawless, but the amp on the first 2 leaves a little bit to be desired when you're scrutinizing against everything else, as well as maybe if we're talking variety, directional variety is totally covered, but all the rotations are relatively on the same axis. So if we're really being critical about this, that's something that we're looking at. He put down a run that was a benchmark to beat through the end of run 1. Gepper ends up putting down a run, still has a couple issues in the run, some small bobbles, which made him ultimately touchable in the end. Ferreira coming down on run 3 with just the cleanest run I've seen him do. Very technically difficult. Switch right dub 10 into the left dub 16, right down the pipe dub flat 10, switch left dub 10 into the right dub 16. Not adventuring out into some of those more creative lead tails that we've seen him do in those tricks, which I think is ultimately highlighted version of what you can do with that.
Right.
But this contest that day was really more about getting a run down, and like Ferreira skied super clean. That run is very technically difficult. He did exactly the run that he needed to do to win. Henry got to drop after Ferreira because he qualified higher than Ferreira and put down a one-upped version of his run, including the switch 14 on hit 2. But ultimately, while close in comparison to that run of Ferreira's, we just felt like Ferreira's had a bit more continued amplitude, like maintained throughout the half pipe. And even though like Henry's 216s, you can put those against any 116s that have ever been done. They're the two best that have ever been done in the pipe. But ultimately, like it is the full run. And when we're looking at amplitude and how much amplitude needs to factor in the way that we reward these things, we felt we did the right thing between 1 and 2 that day in that contest. Ultimately, Gepper at the time of the last drop was in 3rd place. He stepped it up and went for his full run, including his new switch double bio 12, switch right alley-oop dub bio 12, which he got absolutely bodied on, but massive props for trying that trick.
Yeah.
He just probably didn't have enough pipe left in it, but that trick would have completely reshaped the landscape of that podium.
Yeah.
He went so big on it. Another shout out before I get to the last run, I guess, Hunter Hess, like not really being able to put down a full pull in this contest that didn't have any mistakes. He was aiming to do that double Misty in the run, which I know he'll bring out soon, dealing with so much crap from our president and other people that are supporting of that tweet. But like, I just thought showed unbelievable level-headedness, like
resilience. Like, I mean, from getting bodied in practice, like I heard from the pipe shaper, he took out like a meter of the pipe with his ass and had this massive hematoma on his hip and had to get it drained, had a broken hand, which we didn't know about until afterwards. So not only that, and going through, on his words, like the worst 2 weeks of his life, being under the microscope, being harassed for not even making like that aggressive of a comment, just kind of being like, yeah, it's a little weird. And for some reason got picked out. And so, yeah, it's a whole nother topic. But anyway,
I mean, tremendous resilience, major role model energy. Big props to Hunter. When he landed his run in qualifying and came down and did the L on his head, I was so hyped.
Yeah.
Saw some really crazy tricks happening in that final that people were doing. Andrew Longino coming in with a wild run, including a new switch dub 12 that he's got. Dylan Marino going absolutely massive, trying seemingly a new rotation on a dub flat 12 in the pipe.
Yeah. Just flat 3 to back full, kind of.
Yeah, I mean, just a wild axis, but some really cool stuff happening. Ultimately, Ferreira sitting in first, going to the last run. Henry in second with Gepper in third, and Brendan McKay just came down and put some classic amplitude on it and just skied to the best of his abilities, doing the run that we've seen him do, but just did it head and shoulders above everyone else. And ultimately, that was enough to bump Gep off the podium. Would have loved to see Gep get another podium in there, but again, like this contest, it ended up being quite a bit defined by mistakes, you know, and it's always tough to like know what everyone's capable of and then understand what was left on the table by some people. But still, the way that it lined up for TV, I got really positive feedback from people like, that was the best contest I've ever seen. And it was like, oh, crazy. Like you didn't see half of what I know is possible. You know, even if you saw what Gus had in store. That would have been everyone had other stuff in store. They were just trying to kind of survive the night.
Well, and I think it's tough, obviously, having to qualify the same day. That's a lot of skiing in the same day. I mean, from being at that adrenaline level through qualifying, then having 7 hours in between to kind of get back on, okay, now I got to amp myself up again. I mean, it's got to be tough to get yourself back on, all right, it's game time, like double header, but with a big break in between. Like if they would have gone straight into it, maybe it would have been different. Maybe it would have been a different show, but I don't know. It was what it was. And yeah, from the TV truck perspective, it was exciting. It crescendoed at the end. We had a storyline to build out. We had someone sitting in first who didn't get a drop last, and it was exciting. No, this wasn't at the level that we had hoped, knowing what people could have done. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and ultimately, like, no disrespect because they skied at a really high level. I just think it would have been awesome if they were pushed if Ferrer was pushed to grab lead tail in that
yeah,
16
yeah,
because
true,
he's got it.
yeah.
He's got the tail in the other 16. If he was pushed into a situation where that was necessary, and again, it was just a good contest, but I think just the injury earlier in the day that really kind of
Yeah.
like made things feel unsettled. But then, so like just after we get done with the men's final, we got one contest left, and it's the women's pipe final. We got all day to wait for this contest to happen at night, and the weather is just coming in at this point, which it's been kind of just in and around. On that night, that's when we got the call that we weren't going to be able to run the contest that night, that we were going to have to delay this 3-week trip that I had been on already, and all the judges that were still there, that we were going to have to push back another day, reschedule our flights, change our travel plans, and we are going to have a go at it the next morning after this whole venue is supposed to already be shut down by that point.
Well, and before we get into that, it was very interesting through this whole Olympics, the avenues of information. Who got information first, where that information came from. Not only that, rescheduling, when we did have to reschedule events, how we had the FIS people, so our FIS delegates, our FIS people, Richie Date, that crew, Robbie, they make a decision, then it goes to the IOC. And so it goes to the Olympic governing body. Then after that, it has to be sent to the rights holders. Those are the people who are paying for the broadcast throughout the world. And so it's like an hour-long process, maybe more, to make a decision. So we get the not official notification that, okay, we're going to push, but it's not official. Then it would move to the next step. Then it would move to the next step. And then someone would know. And it was interesting how sometimes it was me. Like, I'd find out through broadcast and tell you guys, and you'd be like, "Oh, how'd you know that?" And it
Yeah,
was
yeah, exactly.
interesting how those avenues and that communication were just kind of all over the place through this entire event. But yeah, so we ended up finding out that the weather wasn't going to work. They tried to do everything possible to make the pipe ready. It snowed. It was estimated to snow like 5 centimeters, and it snowed like 25 in like 2 hours, maybe. I mean, it dumped, but they had everything. They tried to put a tarp down on the bottom of the pipe so they could clear it out, and they tried everything possible to make it happen, and it wasn't going to go. So I texted you asking, like, what's your plan as far as like scheduling? Like, you got to rebook and everything, and you just let me know beers and Pokemon cards.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of what was needed at the time. We had a rough day, so we needed Anton Bjorklund saw the Pokemon cards were available at the toy store next to the bar at the hotel that we were staying at. So he got started. He bought a pack. We kept going back. We got more packs. I didn't realize until I had opened them that they were in
Both of
Italian,
us, yeah.
which that was a buzzkill. But now I have a couple Pokemon cards in
Yeah.
my backpack. I don't want to pass them along and get my my daughter involved in Pokemon cards.
Well, I showed my Pokemon cards to Millie, and she looked through every single one and was very upset that there were no unicorns.
It's rough. Yeah,
she's
no,
not,
they don't make nearly enough unicorn Pokemon.
there's no unicorns. So she moved on from them very quickly. But yeah, so that last night, you guys had to figure out, okay, what are we doing? It's rescheduling to the next day, which would be morning of the next day. Um, I didn't have an option. We knew we'd have to make a skeleton crew to get it done as far as on the TV side. I had to get home because my wife had a trip going out, and I had to transfer over and become dad at home, and we only had like a 12-hour leeway there, so it wasn't going to happen. So I kept going with my flight plan. You had to reschedule and stay. And so the next morning, as I'm on my way to Milan, flight gets canceled anyway, had to rebook. That's besides the point. I'm watching half pipe finals from the Milan airport while you guys are still.
Yep, yeah. So we changed our plans. We knew we were gonna get in there, judge the contest first thing in the morning, and that we had a shuttle to get us out. I knew I was gonna have to stay the night in Milan, then I was gonna fly out the next day, but we did have a an off chance to be able to get some of the judges to their 8 p.m. flights if we hopped on the shuttle immediately after the contest. So, contest got going. The weather was actually beautiful, so I guess it proved right that they delayed the contest. And some really high level runs from everyone. Amy Frazier really set the tone in the first run, doing the best run I've seen from her for sure, with the switch right 9, switch left 5, switch right 7, left 9, right 9 combo, skiing with some pretty good amplitude. If anything, we're always just looking how locked in are her grabs, and that really is the only defining factor, because on paper that run is one of the most complicated runs that we're seeing throughout the day. We did have some issues in the first run where people just not, I guess this pipe was maybe skiing a little bit longer than people are used to, but some people were leaving a lot of half pipe, and we really had kind of been clear with the way we were going to treat that beforehand. And when we started seeing it in finals, we really tried to kind of make a clear statement that you had to finish the half pipe. Mainly so when we started seeing a couple riders leaving 4 and 5 lines left in otherwise complete runs, which we calculated to being a literal quarter of the half pipe that was left if you left 5 lines, because there were 20 lines in this half pipe. So that was kind of like affecting it a little bit, but ultimately the skiing we saw coming down run 1 was really good. Zoe put a run down. Eileen did not. She fumbled on her first trick and then ended up just kind of scrapping it and rebaiting it run 2. Kind of set up where, Zoe was in the lead after run 1. Amy Frazier had put something good down. Indra had a really good run, but ultimately, based on where she exited the pipe, it kind of wasn't stacking up. Run 2 comes down. Eileen puts down a full pull, which kind of at that point, she just set the new standard for the day. Her grabs, her amplitude, the variety, the differentiation of the grabs, all of that just really ended up being really good. Capping with those 2 alley-oop flat 5s with really accentuated grabs done just with some really solid maintained amplitude throughout the entire half pipe. But then kind of what was the most exciting part of that competition ended up being the battle between second and third, and Lee and Zoe both landing runs that were really pushing each other. Ultimately, Lee ending up in that silver position, landing the first run with 2 grabbed switch 9s in it that I've seen, good amplitude throughout. Zoe made it very close, and like Zoe from a technical perfection standpoint, she skied out of her mind in that contest. And I think ultimately she did on her final run where she got everything really well and got that switch right 9. She opted out of doing the left alley-oop flat 5 mute. And ultimately, I think that probably would have been the thing that would have had the potential to put her over the edge in comparison to Lee. Lee's run, very good, maintained amplitude, high level of difficulty, grabs all held, but maybe not to the standard of definition that we're seeing from Zoe. In a less complicated run, maybe with doing 5s and an alley-oop 3 in there. But ultimately, when Zoe's able to incorporate both of those alley-oop spin directions, I think it does give an additional bump to this run that very easily could have seen it go either way. But ultimately, skiing out of her mind, again, probably my favorite run to watch during the day, just skiing so smooth, ending up in that bronze medal position. Amy Frazier ultimately with that great run, ending up finishing 4th. And then Indra Brown, again, having her fantastic debut season, ended up climbing all the way up to 5th place, doing possibly the most technically complicated run of the day, with both cork 9s, a cork 7, a switch right 5, a switch left 7, and a left alley-oop flat 5. But just the amplitude, again, being the one thing. Once she gets a little bit of amplitude under her, it's going to be a completely different story for how we're looking at Indra's runs. And she did end up finishing the pipe with two lines left, not 5. So we're able to reward for the real difficulty that she brought to the table. But ultimately, really, really good showing from the field. And then we were ready to get out of there after a long 3 weeks, run into the hotel to make sure we didn't miss that shuttle.
Yep. Well, and that was the Olympics, at least as far as the events go. Couple things we kind of skipped over that we'll maybe touch on. We had a Rule 50. So Rule 50 is an interesting one. Rule 50 comes into play with a couple instances, one of which can be political statements on helmets, which we saw in, I believe, luge or skeleton racer from the Ukraine, having some pictures on his helmet of people who passed away in the war being removed from competition because of that. It also has to do with branding, and size of branding, which we've seen a lot in the past. I think you remember in the past they used to have the Olympic Oakley goggles with the small O because it couldn't be the big O and things like that. And then it also comes into play where it has to be equipment that's being sold, X amount of uh, units that have to be sold before being used in the Olympics, which is why Sean with the white space boards made a big push to sell a bunch of those beforehand, so on and so forth. Um, but yeah, so we did have a few Rule 50 things. I don't know if you want to jump into
Yeah,
that.
I mean it's funny just because that's something that like I've never considered. You know, like I honestly, the bigger the branding, the funnier I think it is for the most
Yeah,
part.
but the Olympics
But
are
yeah,
a
it
different
is
thing because a lot of people pay a lot of money to have specific branding there, and but
absolutely.
you can't just blast a big Oakley O on the helmet. Like it has to be regulated.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, it's just way more locked up. And just in general, I think the Olympics creates like a different atmosphere than any other contest I've ever been a part of, just in the level of pressure, the things that are going on, the amount of discourse about the results, anything that could possibly be of conversation because it's getting publication at that point in time. You know, it's hot. It's on the news. It's on the TV. People want to talk about whatever they possibly can. The Rule 50 thing I do think is interesting, just because I think a lot of stuff slips until it's an issue, and then when it's
Yeah,
an issue, it's like, okay, how do you actually enforce this? Because we haven't said anything about all of these other instances, which is all thoroughly documented through video that we could replay and see. You know, so ultimately, I'm always curious about like who's policing this. You know, it always seems to be after the fact rather than like in real time. And if there was somebody at the bottom that just was like, "Hey, man, you can't wear those goggles,"
right.
nope. Then it's a little bit different that you knew and you didn't say. And I know people are gonna say they know, you know, they're being paid to wear this stuff. They know what they're doing, but I just don't. I never would want that to be the reason to invalidate a result. You
Right.
know.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too. I mean, like you're saying, the Olympics have so much more pressure and so many more eyes on them. But anyway, so those sort of things happen. And with you being on the jury as the head judge, so the jury is the deciding factor in these events, along with other officials, FIS officials, and so on and so forth. You have to go in and have these meetings and have these conversations with the IOC, where then they have to make decisions. So it's interesting. Definitely an interesting thing that we don't have to deal with on a regular basis.
Exactly. Yeah. Just like something that just I mean, the Olympics feels different and feels bigger when you're there, even though like this really wasn't much different than a world championships.
Mm.
There weren't other sports that we were exposed
Right.
to. We weren't anywhere near alpine, downhill. We weren't anywhere near curling, figure skating, ice hockey, biathlon. Like we didn't see any of that. The only thing that we saw are things that are directly tied into our world generally. You know, the snowboarding and free ski disciplines on slope, half pipe, and big air. Border cross was right next to us. Parallel giant slalom or
Which
parallel
was
slalom,
sick.
the F1 of snowboarding, I
It
might
was
add,
sick.
was right next to us.
It had one of the
Um,
biggest crowds the entire
it had a
time.
massive
Yeah.
crowd. It had a massive crowd. And then the moguls and aerials, like again, all of this is stuff that we see because it's lumped in with our sports. So it didn't really feel much bigger except for the eyes that were coming in. Like I was having family members texting me about I mean, nobody watches the contests that I judge. That
Yeah.
I
Well, it's
that
hard to watch them.
But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
especially like during you're gonna tune into a contest that's happening in the middle of the night for your time. That's a World Cup in Italy, you know. But the Olympics draws a different level of attention to detail, so it just makes it high scrutiny, high pressure. You want to make sure you do well.
Well, speaking of attention to detail, one of the hottest pins of the entire Olympics, which I think you probably expected it to be a relatively hot item, at least in our friend group, but when you got there and the amount of people that wanted it.
Yeah, I thought it was funny when I made it, and then at first when I showed up, I was like, this is too hot. I'm going to get in trouble for this. I did not explicitly ask permission to use the Olympic logo for this rendition,
Well, you
but
weren't selling it, so
I wasn't selling it, and I have
yeah,
never sold it.
yeah.
But
Well,
ultimately,
this
yeah,
is this is great
I was,
podcasting, but if you're not watching right now, it's the Olympic rings with 69 in the logo, and it was the judges' pin for this Olympics, and it turned into a pretty hot commodity in the Livigno circle there.
yeah, I was impressed with how much traction it got, and we ultimately I did not make enough. I do have a small supply. Maybe that's something that if people sign up for the Patreon, they
There
get
you
a
go.
pin.
Yeah,
But I don't know if I can spare them. I might need to do a full another run of these
I think
because
you
I
should.
think that this could live on for a while.
I don't see why not.
My big achievement at this was TJ Schiller put it on his hat, and I just thought that was cool because TJ Schiller was a childhood hero of mine and was running the dumb pin I made on his hat. I mean, the Olympics is like the pin trade is a real thing.
It's crazy.
We came into the last Olympics, we didn't have any pins, so it was just like, oh, we don't get to participate in this. So I decided to make one for the judges that I distributed to the judges, and then ultimately the pin trade is like centered around the credential lanyards that everyone gets, you know. So you'll see, I mean, mainly so the main culprits ended up being the people at the entrance and exit of these venues
Oh my
because they
gosh.
were scalping people's
Yeah.
pins. But they were loaded. Like you'd see some people that you can't even see fabric; you just see pins on their lanyards. But the 6'9" pin, I was always honored when I'd see it make the move onto someone's hat. You know.
Yep. Yeah, and there were a few. There were definitely, I gave a few away because you gave me a bag beforehand, and I ran through them way too fast. I started getting a little more specific on who got them. But at first, it was like, you want one? Yeah, I'll give you one. And then
Exactly.
like week two, I had two left, and I was like, I messed up.
Yeah, I specifically set some aside for half pipe. I was like,
Yeah.
I cannot let these leave my backpack, or else I don't get to give them to any half pipe people because half pipe showed up in the third week of all this and like already kind of had a abbreviated experience of it.
Well, and they showed up for Big Air, and you guys are judging, and the amount of people that came over to me and was like, "Where do I get my 69 pin? How do I
Yeah.
get my 69 pin?" I was like, Jason, I don't have any left.
I was stoked when people wanted them. I got some good. My pin collection's looking decent after this one, but
yeah.
still could be better.
You have any other random things from that? I mean, we kind of touched on everything. We're pushing a long episode here, but that's okay.
Yeah, I think we're at 2 hours. I think we covered just about anything I could think to. I'm sure we'll think of other stuff that we could bring up at in a follow up episode when we realize how much we really missed.
Do we want to do a Mount Rushmore?
If you want to, I know you had one, and you told me it before we started recording, and I pushed it out of my head. But I'm sure that I can act on it and figure something out.
Oh, we can just go for it. So I only have 3 names written down, so I'm gonna blow it anyway. Skiers this generation, so the new generation, as far as Gen Z, whatever they're called now, the generation of young free skiers coming up that they don't know about or don't appreciate. So the Mount Rushmore of skiers that the new generation either doesn't know about or don't appreciate the way that we do.
Okay, you going first or me?
I'm gonna go first just because I feel like I'm gonna blow it if I don't. So I'm gonna go, and this is off of a conversation I had with some kids that I'm coaching. And my one of one, I'm gonna take Tornator Wallace. And I was shocked. I was offended. I was shocked, and I didn't know how to act. I had kids that I'm coaching who are good skiers who seem pretty up with the game and the times who did not know who Torn was. And it shook me. And it's not like Torn's been gone that many years out of the game. So it was one of those that I really was shocked that much. I don't know if it's just that they're constantly seeing Danny B and all these like hot boys, and they just have missed out on the era of touring. So touring,
I mean, it's what have you done for me lately?
I guess, yeah.
And Torin, like, I mean, I think had tremendous impact in the pipe world, but left left too early. And I mean, in the contest world, all it takes is a couple years and you're completely forgot. Like, yeah, I agree. I'm surprised at how few people give him the recognition I feel he deserves, you know? In a similar vein, if I'm going to go next, PK Hunder.
Oh, great
Um,
choice.
I think he is just like, he was so ahead of the game in all of the axes that ended up being so foundational to the way that the sport ended up progressing. And he never really was rewarded to the fullest of his abilities for that, based on that text to judge X Games where he did the first switch dub wobble 12 and forward dub 12,
Yeah.
both in like the most proper axis. Like, again, another thing that really stood out to me with PK was his axis taste, you know, it was so flat, it was so nice. I really liked the way he did it, and I feel like he's been totally lost to anyone referencing or bringing him up nearly as much as they should.
All right, you get another one. Snake draft.
Okay, snake draft. I'm gonna go now with just another classic that I feel like I'm always surprised when people don't know who this is, but this is a tremendously old head take in David Crichton.
Yeah, good choice.
I think, yeah, again, he's on pretty much, I fit him in on any Mount Rushmore I possibly can, but I think he's done enough to deserve that.
All right, my next is going to be Kaya Tursky. I know she's doing some commentary for CBC now for events and stuff, but I don't think people understand, at least this generation, understand the dominance that was Kaya Tursky. And also the progression and how far ahead she was of the rest of the field in rails and jumps and execution. So my number 2 is going to be Kaya.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And then
she was so dominant for so long, and then just tremendously affected by injuries.
Yeah. And then my third, and this is a tough one because there's a bit of like underground / still in the mix, but I'm going to go with Kai Mahler. And mainly on Kai's like competition side of things, like people, I don't think a lot of kids and this younger generation understand the level of competition skier in big air specifically Kai was. And I mean, he was, yeah, the things,
doing things that are just now being paralleled.
Yeah,
you know, like people are just now starting to figure out some of the things that he did almost 10 years ago. Yeah, he, again, so ahead of his time, and still a tremendous skier, but yeah, people don't know the half of it. All right, next up for me, Charles Gagne.
Oh yeah, good choice.
He's like so pivotal to so much of what's being done now with like the creative slides from everybody, unique grab choices where him and his brothers pioneered so many grab selections, Vinny Cash as well, like carrying on that, but like really involved in skiing in a clash with like what was the peak of the sport at the time, and just so fun and interesting to watch his competitive approach compared to other people that he was going up against in that era, you know?
Great choice.
Last.
I know I'm struggling with my last one.
There's so many, but I'm okay. I'm gonna go with the one that I think this one still, like I'll reference this name, and when people don't know who it is, I'm upset with them. Corey Vanuler.
Wow, you stole him.
He just, again, like I think he's coaching kids now. And I always think it's funny, like Max Hill, Corey Vanuler, they're coaching. TJ Schiller was just coaching. T-Pod. Liam Downey has been coaching for a while. When kids don't like, I mean, there's no way you really could comprehend the person that's coaching you and how much that person represented about this sport to everyone else, you know. But Corey Vanuler, I think, was the definition of style through the brief glimpses that we got of him, and have influenced so many of the best, but like he never really, I feel, got his flowers to the capacity that he deserved, you know.
100%. I'm like debating on a couple here, and I think it's a tough call because he has popped up again recently, but I don't know if he gets appreciated the way that we appreciate them. And I also don't know if this generation really knows who he is. But I'm gonna go with Andreas Hotbite.
I was waiting for it. Yeah.
Just because you took C-Van, that was gonna be my go.
Andreas is a great one though. Like I mean, again, he was changing the game when I was like buying ski movies and just
Yeah,
obsessed with this, and then still can go out to his backyard park and change the game on a day to day basis.
or show up to an X Games rail jam and be competitive with the
Yeah,
best young gun slopestyle skiers and rail skiers in the world at 40 plus years old.
exactly. Just the nicest dude, workhorse. Like I mean, it's great to see him still skiing. He's got his kids skiing now and doing stuff, but always underappreciated. That massive air that he did, I think it was in War or X equals
Yeah,
10.
I think it was War. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh my God. I've watched that so many times.
When I was trying to come up with some other ones, I wish I would have been a little more prepared here, but that was my last minute like scroll
Tony,
thing. Zav for sure, Zav.
Joff
Oh,
mainly.
the Joffrey would be a great one to throw in there. People don't know. Um, the other thing I wanted to bring up about the Olympics that I thought was really cool, interesting, cool, um, slightly heartbreaking at the same time was David Wise going to the Olympics with his family, not making the team, not making a chance for a fourth straight medal, medaling in every single Olympics before in halfpipe, not making the team in this one, just not skiing up to his potential leading into it, but still going, supporting the team, bringing his family out as a spectator. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, I mean, rad to see Dave there, and like, it's surreal to have a contest of that magnitude without him there because of how dominant he's been. Ultimately, yeah, he's been dealing with some injuries and an assortment of other stuff, I'm sure, but it's crazy seeing him still do it because again, I went to my first U.S. Open with him. Like I traveled on the plane with him to our first U.S. Open where he uh, at that point in time had demonstrated that he was going to be the next big half pipe skier, and then to have the career that he has, to still be pushing it, like to know that he was really only a spot or two off but still going and bringing his family, I just think that had to be a really cool experience for him. And another like shout out, I saw Tesla do there at the Olympics. I know she knows that's her contest to be competing in, but due to other factors she's not able to be in that contest. So just really cool. Like the Olympics really is a unique situation that brings out a different vibe than any other contest. And I'm privileged and excited to have done it, but also relieved to have it in the past. Now, you know, this was a big benchmark on the horizon for years. And shout out to the judges who worked with me: Toby Grotz, Anton Bjorklund, Jonas Fjellstead, Dane Kirk, Flo Brandley, Will Tucker, Antonin Ferrari, Victoria Beatty, and Elliot Carter. All did a tremendous job. Adam Fursell, our trick caller, as he was brought in to
didn't do much, but was a vibes guy for sure.
Being a trick caller with me there is counterproductive because I'm not gonna be quiet short enough. But he was a yeah, personality hire. You know,
Yep.
we needed him for the plot.
Yeah, well, lost some pins, gained some back. He had quite the adventure in Livigno. He was living Livigno.
Ate some interesting things.
Ate a lot of
yeah,
interesting things. So.
we had a great time in Italy. The only tough part was being away from the family, which I know you were going through the same as me. And yeah, it's nice to be back now and kind of revel in it a little bit. Having so many people ask me what the experience was like and not really knowing what to say, you know, because it just really was so immersive. I think it was Stan put it so well, and it was at the Slush article, the snowboard one, just as to what the post-Olympic haze really feels like. And like after my Olympic experience, I went immediately to a shuttle to the airport, stayed a night at a hotel in Milan, got started the next day, went to Frankfurt, got delayed in Frankfurt, got stuck in San Francisco overnight, had to stay another night. So my travel plan ended up being 50 something plus hours getting back to get out of all this. But yeah, good experience overall.
Well, that'll do it for the Big O Show episode, I think. We'll probably, I'm sure, touch more into it. I'd love to get Garrett and Noah on the next one and get their fan perspective from home watching, and maybe get the man himself, Tom Wallish, on here to kind of hear
that'd be cool. and maybe
perspective.
get some questions. I know that I got a lot of questions about
Yeah,
stuff, and I'm happy to speak a little bit more to that now. I know Tom and I are on the last snow league of the year in Locks in a couple weeks, but maybe we won't have to wait that long to do something if we can have Tom grace us with his presence from over there in Austria.
yeah, that would be great. So yeah, we'll drop a post, get some comments, some questions, and we can answer those in the next ones. But we knew this was going to be a long one already. We're just past 2 hours and 15 minutes. So yeah, hopefully we didn't bore you, but it was 3 weeks of Groundhog Day over there in Italy, and happy it's over, but happy that it happened. So yeah, you got anything else?
Nope, all good.
All
Have
right,
a good evening, Pete.
you too, Jason. Thank